Captain on the bridge.
Alright, captains, we are back on the bridge, and today, finally, I'm gonna go through the ranking the episodes for Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Yes, captains, you know that we've been covering it here on the YouTube bridge, and it has just been a joy. Other than having in real life stuff, duties just kind of getting in the way of this making this video, it was really hard for me to rank this, but I had mentioned there in the videos, I believe it was like 8, 9, and 10, I was having troubles placing them in terms of ranking them. Now this is just something for fun. This is of course just my two ECs. So, but this is something I wanted to do, and that is rank the episodes on how I saw them from 10 to 1. Having said that, just because something lands in the number 10 spot, it does not mean by any means that it's a bad episode. This whole season was just absolutely insane. And I say that because there's almost no episode I don't like. I have my nitpicks here and there, of course. It's not perfect, but it is the Star Trek that has almost, let's say, reignited that fire, I guess. That may be too much, but maybe reignited the warp core. See what I did there? No? Right. Reigniting the warp core, sort of the love and passion I have for Star Trek. And captains, you know I've been sort of raving about this ever since we started covering this. Now, I never thought here on the YouTube bridge that I would do any sort of reviews for Trek and stuff, because most things that we cover here on the bridge are Star Trek Online related, but with how things have gone here for the past year in terms of Star Trek Online going into Star Trek Picard, even us getting ships from Star Trek Strange New Worlds, well, the Star Trek Discovery being the Enterprise there, it's just been something that I wanted to talk about. So what I'd like to do in this video is go over the episodes, drop the two ECs, maybe have some honorable mentions, and then finally give my conclusions by ranking them on how I see them. So here we go, on screen. So again, we're gonna use the thumbnails that we have done for the videos that we've done, starting with episode 1. So episode 1, Strange New Worlds. Now, I feel that with me doing the thumbnails, it was sort of a reflection sometimes on how I felt. As you can see here, I use the I'm home sort of meme with the Tony Stark there, and along with saying it's so beautiful, I put in the Enterprise on there, and then I had the image of a Cowboy Pike making his transition into the Captain Pike. And this episode was so strong in terms of how it hit the ground. It was really good in my opinion, and for the longest time it was really up there, and there was almost nothing I didn't like about this episode. And as I mentioned, it had come across very, very strongly, and my opinion of it is still of that it's very strong and it's very good. And this is the episode where we saw the Shittle come across, and also Admiral April. We got to meet him, and throughout the season had a little glimpse of him there. But I think this really did establish the tone to the start of the season, especially establishing Pike and him and how he sort of the crew. So I feel that in terms of starting a season, this was a great episode. And again, when I say it was so beautiful, I really did mean it in terms of the episode being very engaging. And I found that this was one of the efforts that came across not efforts, but sort of themes, I should say, that came across from this episode to the rest, to the end of the season, which was the pacing. It kept me engaged the whole time. Now, it felt like these segments were very short, but they were just right. They were just right, in my opinion, where it would go from one story to the next, and also we would get introduced to our crew here. And again, I loved it. It was a really strong start, in my opinion. And having them also give that respect to the Enterprise, like I'd mentioned before, the Enterprise itself is a character, and I loved how they just respected that. And we'll touch a little bit more on that, but again, episode 1, it's really hard for me not to love that one. So the next one, though, was episode 2, which was Children of the Comet. Now, there's some things that I found out of this. That alien, the Shepherd, I had thought it was CGI, but captains, you know that we actually found out that that was actually real. That was an actual actor, and apparently there's like animatronics and everything like that. And I believe that was touched upon in our discussion that we had on the bridge here with Bruce Horak. Shout out to you, sir, aka Hammer. We'll talk about that more later, but thought we'd throw that in there now. This was, of course, a more Uhura-centric episode. I will say that she has such a beautiful voice. She's a different Uhura, of course, and that was kind of one of the things that was sort of our, I don't want to say nitpicks, because again, when you have new people portraying the legacy characters, it's really hard not to, of course, compare them to the legacy characters. And Uhura, I feel that, of course, they had a lot of background to explore, and I do feel like with Uhura they did that. So I was connecting with her. Now you'll see that a lot, and of course Pike be connecting. You know, captains have a captain crush on Pike there. But Uhura, I was able to connect with her instantly, and how that she was sort of finding herself. That was kind of her theme, was she was finding herself. And here we get the sense that in this episode she was really getting into her own in terms of linguistics, trying to figure things out. And you know, throughout the season, she also had her moments. I enjoyed it when she had lines. I enjoyed it when she was on screen, and she had this awesome connection with Hammer. And of course, captains, we know this is how Team Hamura was born. Hashtag Team Hamura. I love that when she said that in that episode. But I really do feel that this episode was very strong, but I did have my issues with it. It being with, and actually we'll go back to the first one now, tying this into what I'm about to say, though, I did not expect the connection I would have with La'an. But as I mentioned before, it was very up and down. And this episode 1 had her in there. And I fell in love with her. I connected with her instantly. But when it came to episode 2, I felt like she was very overbearing. She was trying too hard. That was just for me. Not to say I didn't like her. Loved La'an, but I just felt like there's times that I would connect with her, but also times that I disconnect with her. Now, this is also one of the episodes where we see the Enterprise actually firing something, which was phasers and photons, which were sort of meh. The phasers threw me off, because this should have been blue phasers, because that's what they used in Star Trek Discovery. And we know that in the original series, they were using blue phasers. The photons were supposed to be white. I don't want to say supposed to, but sort of common knowledge they were supposed to be white. And in Discovery, they were white. Here, they were red. Now, you can chalk it up to, all right, that they changed the frequencies, because that's something that they can do with phasers. The photons, they were red. Again, the photons here were modified. Could they have taken that into account? Sure. But maybe not. Again, I don't want to delve in it too much, because again, at the end of the day, this is just a TV show, this is a series, but this is one of the issues that a lot of fans have when they start switching visuals, and the issues that I have of going backwards in time as opposed to going forward, because with all the established canon out there, tracks that have come before, they always tend to just retcon things, change things. I get it. This is a reimagine, sure. Just tell us. Just tell us it's a reimagine. Say it's just our spin on it, sure. And in the end, I kind of take it that way. This is their spin on it. But regardless, a very strong episode. I found that it was really, like I said, engaging. The whole comets and how it was a sentient being, and with the shepherds there, the small little fight that they had here, and sort of the rock and roll maneuver Ortegas did. And again, I have just nothing but great memories of this episode, because it was really, really good as well. So the next one we'll get here. Now, I use this thumbnail because this was the episode that we discussed on stream here on the YouTube bridge, along with, of course, the legendary Vesta that came up. But captains, you already know that Una was one of my favorite characters from Discovery, and I'm glad they had made her the #1 here. And this episode was really good with Una because she was the focus and the focal point of it. Of course, being revealed that she is an Illyrian, but with like the all genetic mods and everything. This episode really had the feels. It got me at the very end when Pike was talking to her and essentially just said, you know what, I like you for who you are. So we all know that Star Trek does try to sort of take lessons from the real world and kind of put that on the screen. And I really did appreciate that. Again, it showed that she had like I don't want to say superpowers, but of course, just her genetics were altered to the point where she could actually sort of protect herself. This was the one where, of course, it was kind of a virus thing, and it hit close to home, obviously, because we were in the pandemic, kind of still am, really, to be honest with you. But as of recording of this video, I loved how it sort of mimicked what we were going through, so we can sort of connect with it. I connected with it, obviously, because, of course, Captain, some of you know that the Admiral, my wife, actually works in the healthcare industry and one of the frontline workers, have been working with the pandemic here, right in the front lines. But so with that aspect, it really did hit closer to home on how things were sort of taking steps, the whole isolating thing and trying to figure out what's going on, the best thing. And we found out here in this episode, she's super strong. Her body can sort of protect herself from things, and we saw a little fight between her and La'an there, so that was pretty cool. So again, with La'an and Una, they also are really good friends. But Una, to me, was really one of my favorite characters going into Strange New Worlds. And anytime that she was on screen, it was very impactful and just a very confident character. And I love the actress, of course, Rebecca Romaine, playing her. And I didn't expect me to sort of connect with her, but I really do. And captains, you'll hear me just say that because that's what I do feel in terms of the connection, and that's why I get emotionally engaged. And I'm almost at the seat of my pants every these episodes because I'm just in awe on how I'm just following along and enjoying. And really, that was it. So this is a really very enjoyable episode. Of course, they had the happenings there with Spock and Pike. And again, sometimes here you have these episodes where they're just sort of course, introducing the characters, but also have different dynamics between the characters. And I did appreciate that. So really good episode. Another strong one here, in my opinion. So we'll go to the next one here. Of course, episode there for Memento Mori. Now, captains, you know that we actually did a recent interview here on the YouTube bridge and Twitch bridge with Matthew Capacci, who is one of the assistant editors for Strange New World. We've had such a great, and again, we'll touch on that later. This is one of the episodes he wrote, and as much as I had mentioned I had an up and down relationship with La'an, this is where I actually reconnected with her because we got a little bit more of her background, and she was a little bit more reserved in this, but we get also the boogeyman of, I believe, like the season, which was the Gorn. Now, for myself personally, the Gorn has been a joke since I've sort of been introduced to them. Of course, the rubber sort of costume and on TOS, and of course in Star Trek Online, they're actually our allies, so it's kind of weird. But I do appreciate how they made them the boogeyman again, but it was more introduction to La'an's past and why she is or how she is. And this episode, of course, was about them kind of remembering those who have fallen before them. And you know, this had, I read the reason why I used the image there at the bottom right there was because that was the moment here, and this is, I believe, when Team Hemura was born, because in this episode you had also Hemmer and Uhura in the cargo bay with Hemmer being hurt, and they had to fix something, so Uhura had to be talked through the repairs by Hemmer. And again, we got more background on Hemmer, got a little bit more background on Uhura, and that this moment here was when, of course, Pike was trying to see what had happened, because this is also when they fought the Gorn in the sort of like nebula, and just some tense moments in this. It was very action-packed and had some fight. Now, we were also introduced to the Gorn ships. Not a fan. Captains, you know I love my ships for the pretty pew-pews. That was not a pretty pew-pew. But we got a sort of close look at the photon torpedo casing. That was kind of cool because they dropped it on top of the Gorn, but the Gorn were using that, of course, to sort of find the Enterprise, and had that little dynamic. And Matthew did say it had sort of this submarine feel to it. And when he said, I never really came to me when I was watching, but when he said that, I get it, because it was like sonar and everything. So I do absolutely love this episode. In that moment when, you know, her and Hemmer they did speak, that I did feel what the image was projecting. Just yes, you know, just yes. And that's what I've been saying, where I felt like I've been emotionally engaged and just connecting to the story, to the characters. And again, this one's a very, very strong La'an centric, of course, story. Of course, Pike always has his isms, and I've always said that Pike will always set the tone, and he always has been setting the tone. And just really do appreciate them actually making their Gorn scary or feel scary. And I believe them not showing was good. And this was the episode as well where we had a little bit of a teaser. No, I would say teaser, sorry, that's not the right word, but also actually even episode 1, where Burnham from Star Trek Discovery was also mentioned, because in that picture you see there La'an, that was actually from the mind meld that she had with Spock, and at the end of that, La'an actually sort of brought up Burnham that way, and Spock wanted to cut it out. And we saw a little shuttle action here too as well. So very, very strong episode, and it's going to probably show in the ranking. But again, Captain, just because something's like at the very, I don't want to say bottom, but bottom, it doesn't mean that it's a bad episode by any means. So there's that. So the next episode here was episode 5, which was Spock-a-Muck. This was fun. I thought this was a fun episode, and we were introduced more to T'Pring. Now, up to this point, I have not been able to connect with Spock. Thought I'd leave this point here where, of course, Spock is one of the legacy characters, but I've said it so many times on stream, I have a hard time connecting with Spock because he just has such big shoes to fill. I understand this is pre, and this is before the Spock we knew, but even at that point, when you see Spock now in even towards the end, because the end, episode 10, actually had us seeing Spockish. Now, we'll get into that a little bit later. It still just is so off to the Spock we know. But to be fair to the actor, it's not that I don't have a problem with him. He's doing great. He's doing what he can do. It's just that felt very just I know this is gonna be a stupid thing to say, but it's just very emotionless. Well, duh. Thanks, Tips. Thanks, Triz. Good job on that one. But he's a Vulcan. But here they're trying to show his sort of internal battle that he's having so with his Vulcan side and human side. And same thing with T'Pring. But this episode I quite enjoyed because we did get introduced to T'Pring in the first episode, and still kind of, even with both of them, very hard for me to connect with them, but was able to connect with them here. And of course, is the episode where they kind of take some sort of inspiration from the TOS episode 2 as well. And I appreciated that. But coming from someone who didn't watch the TOS, I appreciated what I did see, even though I didn't know any of the connections. So keep that in mind as well, Captain. But I've said that before with the reviews. I did not watch TOS. Now with T'Pring and Spock, this is the episode where I connected with them. I feel the strongest, especially with Spock. But with the switch here, they were also having to do two things here. One, they had, and Admiral April was here too as well. This is an episode because this was a episode that they had to have negotiation with the Ringovians. And that dynamic too, I thought was really cool because the Ringovians, during sort of negotiations, were taking traits from their previous negotiations. And I thought that was pretty cool. And of course, Pike picked up on that. Uhura was here too, but not a lot of lines. But of course, this was more of a Spock and T'Pring centric. But you also had that little sort of game happening between Una and La'an. And again, this is where I was, good with La'an here. Obviously Una, but it was Enterprise Bingo where they went through the games that kind of the lower officers would. And I thought that was a really good dynamic to have along with the series. And now T'Pring's side of it, of course, they switch bodies here in this episode. So T'Pring's side of it, we're introduced to what she does and kind of rehabilitating Vulcans who sort of kind of stray away from the path of logic. And we also got some, of course, Ortegas and Nurse Chapel here. And Nurse Chapel I will say Nurse Chapel is one of the surprise characters for me that I love and kept. She never really had a central episode, but I was able to connect with her because she also did a great job of portraying what she needed to portray in the moments that she had to. And this is, of course, one of the things that they've sort of taken from the TOS was the sort of relationship they had, and I've been told from Nurse Chapel and Spock, and I really think Nurse Chapel nails that part because she wants Spock. You can tell she wants Spock. Let's be honest here. But of course, she knows she can't have because, Spock is married to T'Pring. So, again, a very fun episode I thought it was. It had lightheartedness in it. It showed that it felt like almost like a slice of life. And I use that term slice of life, that phrase. That's kind of what I get from usually Dragon Ball Z episodes where they just kind of have these episodes that are after major fights, but now you're just seeing the characters live their life and I thought this had a lot of elements of that here as well. Now, of course, they still respected the Enterprise. They did some beauty shots. No, this was all done on the Starbase too. This is what's getting me, because up to this point, there was really not a lot of shots of the Enterprise in battle, other than just that sort of shot that they did in episode 2 of them hitting the comet. That was it. But I appreciated it because, again, they're not leaving it out. They always show these beauty shots, and then here they were showing the aft shots. They had aft of the Enterprise. I do love the new reiteration of the Enterprise here in Stranger World. So, and then I thought this moment is fun. Of course, in the episode here, you also had Spock say thank you to Nurse Chapel. Again, you can just tell there was something there. But a fun episode. I kind of treated more as a slice of life, but I also thought that this is the episode where I connected a lot more with Spock and T'Pring, and even La'an as well. just seeing their fun side when it comes to just having fun, which will also play a factor in one of the later episodes. So the next one, now here is, we did episodes 6 and 7. Now with 6 and 7, we had number 6 being Lift Us Where Suffering Cannot Reach, and 7 being the Serene Squall. Now the reason why we did this is because we could not do the review of episode 6 right away. And this is where I had trouble actually ranking these two episodes, because they were really good. Now, episode 6, this is another episode our good friend Matthew Capacci did also do work on, and I did not see it coming. So we'll start with episode 6. So this, I never really got the title up until weeks after, because I just realized it, but this had a shock factor, and it really caught me off guard, because one, you see there the elder servant there hooked up into that machine, because it sort of short, kind of, what do you call it, a summary of the episode is, at the end, this elder servant gets hooked up to this contraption that will actually help this species, this race, sort of not come into, not be, become sick and all that, and at the cost of this child's life. And yes, it is a child. Now, I will say that this child actor was really good. I thought that he did really well. They were trying to portray him as someone who was smart, who knew his, knew his stuff there, and even had interactions with Spock there. It was great. Came across there, and the only time that I really felt for the kid is when that moment he saw, I believe, was the elder servant before him, because they saw the actual corpse, and that's when he started heavy breathing. But he still accepted his fate. Now, having said that, this was the whole point of this. You know, we kind of see over the years Starfleet 1 and getting into sort of the other species business, and this was no different. Pike tried to save the kid, but this is their culture. This is the way that they kind of do things, and it kind of really hit, and I didn't expect that I would feel the way I did watching this episode. And of course, that lady there at the bottom left was Pike's love interest in this, and there's scenes that we saw, of course, from the trailer, that we didn't see the woman there, but it was her, and she was a part of the process as well, and so was the elder servant's dad, which is Kamal. Now, this also now plays a part with M'Benga, because we were introduced to M'Benga there already, but of course M'Benga's storyline is he's a doctor of the Enterprise, but also he has his daughter sort of sick, but also in the pattern buffer of the transporters, at least the medical. And one of his missions were, and the thing is, he didn't tell anyone. One of his missions were, being, of course, on the Enterprise, he was trying to find some sort of cure, because his daughter's condition was deteriorating. Now, the one issue I had with this episode that played out at the end of the season was the fact that at the end there, Kamal was talking to M'Benga and asked for Rakia's sort of medical file. Rakia's M'Benga's daughter, and he said, let me look at it. And because of their culture, this also played a part too of Pike's sort of future, because in their culture, this is where the title comes in, Lift Us Where Suffering Cannot Reach. Because of this sort of tradition they have, they don't get sick, there's no disease, they can heal. And so this played, of course, to Pike, because of course we all know Pike's future. but they'd have to be a part of this culture, meaning he would have to live here. Same thing with Rakia. Now, at the end of the whole thing, Kamal, the child's father, was actually trying to save him, and because he'd realized what was going to happen to him, and there were some sort of like separatist people who were also trying to help them out. They thought they were doing bad, but they were actually trying to save him, quote unquote, save him. But this is, again, the tradition. So this had a lot of interesting factors. But again, going back to what I was saying earlier, with the Kamal asking for Rakia's file, I had thought this was going to play a factor that they would come back here to this species and sort of try to help Rakia that way. But that wasn't the case. But there was a very strong episode. There was a lot of things going on here, and that theme here kind of, you can almost kind of call it like it was like a religious tone to it. A lot of the scenes here too also we saw in the trailer because of Alien City there, and it was, again, really well done, I thought, and it did actually pull on the Triz's heartstrings because of what was happening, or what had happened to the elder servant there. And fun fact, apparently, with going back to episode Memento Mori, the younger La'an, oh no, sorry, my apologies, not that one. We'll say that later. But there, he has a sister, which actually also played here a part in this season, which I thought was really cool. I didn't find that out till after, but really, again, just a very good episode, I thought. And this is where I had trouble ranking it. Now, going to episode 7, I thought this was really cool. It almost felt like a slice of life, but it wasn't. The Serene Squall was the name of this episode, and with the Serene Squall, it had, I believe the actress's name is Jessie Keitel. Did she ever have some sass? I loved, and she was like Captain Aspen or something, or sorry, Dr. Aspen was the character that she was portraying in the first portion, but in the end, she was actually Captain Angel, which we actually used one of her commands on the bridge there, but for fun. This had a lot of fun things happening. Now, one of the big reveals was, and this does come into the ranking, was the top right corner. That is Cybok, Spock's brother. So we find out essentially what has happened here is it's a ploy by the pirates, of course, which is Captain Angel, to steal the Enterprise, which he does successfully. And this is also one of the episodes we see phasers firing from the Enterprise, which is sustained orange beams, orange reddish beams, and it was 4 of them too. This is of course when she took over the Enterprise. At that time, she wanted to fire it just cause. So I thought it was cool. I don't know. I thought she'd maybe had probably asked also to fire some photon torpedoes. She didn't eventually. And it's just fired phasers. Now, the whole thing here was what she had wanted to do was do a trade, because Cybok is actually located where T'Pring is working. And there was also that comes into factor with Captain Angel doing a trade with, of course, T'Pring, because she's got Spock, and of course T'Pring's got Cybok, so they wanted to do a trade. Now, Spock does something here which I thought, again, comes into a point where Nurse Chapel does such a good job, because to try and not make the trade happen, he actually tells T'Pring that he has been sort of cheating on her with Nurse Chapel, and they kiss on the bridge. And the moment again, Nurse Chapel, she just does such a good job in really showing us that longing that she is having for Spock, and I appreciated that, and it just made me again connect with Nurse Chapel a lot more. Spock as well, because he actually they sort of showed the human sort of side of it. And when it came to the whole thing at the end, of course, they knew it was T'Pring knew, but they had to sort of act on it. Now, at the same time, this is where you had Pike, Una, La'an sort of go to the Orion ship. There was that sort of B-side thing happening there. Of course, we had our Pikeisms there as well, but they essentially take over the ship too as well, and they did a mutiny there. But even though it wasn't a Pike-centric episode, again, like I said, Pike set the tone. He got his Pikeisms in there, which of course we appreciated and loved. And again, you know, we don't, up to this point, we do get some Ortegas too. Now, I will mention Ortegas. We haven't mentioned her a lot, but she is also one of my favorite characters. She's the helmsman, of course, of the Enterprise. She has her moments there. And, you know, Erica is apparently her name, Erica Ortegas. And I love the relationship that she has with, you see her more on the crew, but she also had a relationship with Uhura, Chapel, and of course, just with Pike. And she had some moments up to this point, but not a lot. So hopefully we get to see more of her in season 2. But going back to this episode 7, this was a really good episode. I thought it was more sort of a slice of life, but of course they introduced Sybok, which I thought would play a part at this point at 7 at the season ending. So other than that, these 2 episodes were great. I enjoyed them. The heartstrings were tugged there in episode 6. For 7, it was just a more fun, and I believe Captain Angel knocked it out of the park and brought a level of sass there that was awesome. And that was already adding on to the level of sass that all the actresses had. Uhura, of course, Ortegas, Una, Chapel, La'an, and Captain Angel just took that and took it to the next level. So I thought it was a really good episode. Of course, there was a reveal with Sybok. Didn't play a factor after that, but very strong in my opinion. That was episode 6 and 7. So now we're gonna go to this episode. Now, this was both fun and also just oof. Now, 6 and 7, we didn't get Hemmer, but we got Hemmer back here on this episode here, and this is called the Elysian Kingdom. Now, we've seen M'Benga actually reading to his daughter, and the book was the Elysian Kingdom. And what had happened in this episode was the Enterprise sort of is in a nebula. They're doing sort of a study on it, but there's a consciousness that kind of takes over, and it takes over the Enterprise, and it makes its essentially all of them the characters from the book. I thought this was really fun. I really did enjoy this episode. I was smiling. I was having a good LOL there. And M'Benga has this sort of, it's hard to explain, like this tone to him, this presence. It's like this a very kind of like one of those mentors you have in life, and someone who really, you know, exudes care. Obviously, he's a doctor. So I think the actor did really great here. But this is a fun episode. Now, it had a lot more sort of that fantasy feel to it, and this is where they used the Enterprise sets and they just redressed them, and everyone had fun here. La'an, I think, kind of you can tell they all kind of had fun here, but La'an had the funnest. Nurse Chapel didn't have a lot of things going on here. She had some weird moments here, but like a couple lines, that was about it. But M'Benga was really showed here, and Hemmer, without being in episode 6 and 7, came back with a vengeance with his sort of wizard, because he was sort of being portrayed as a wizard here. He wasn't affected by what was happening, so it was him and M'Benga. You had a lot of notable moments from their crew. Of course, Ortegas was one of the main characters here. Pike. Pike had his Pikeism here, but in a wimpy way, which is hilarious the way he did it. Even though this wasn't about him, he got in there too, and it was really fun. But what really got me in this episode was the Rukia ending. And again, this goes back to the episode where Liftus where suffering cannot reach, where the Kamal asked for Rakia's file. I thought that was going to be sort of the cure for Rakia, but no. And maybe the reason why I connected this episode a lot more is because I have a daughter who's also young, and by the end of this episode, because the whole thing was at the very end of it all, sort of Emerald Stone in the book that they were reading here was actually Mbenga's daughter. When he finally reached Rakia, that hug, it still gives me goosebumps. That hug, the way they did that moment, the hug, the lighting, the music, and my God, the music in all of these episodes are just terrific and top notch. So I thought it was really great. But the moment between Mbenga and his daughter here, it was really good. And the consciousness kind of took over Hammer and told us what the deal is. And the deal is, yeah, you know what? Rakia's body is sick, but her mind isn't. So if she is to sort of live on, she's going to have to stay in the nebula with the consciousness. And man, it was really hard. And of course the actress as well, the young actress playing Rakia, she did really well here. And all the scenes really, it brought a tear to my eye. I'm not going to lie, my face leaked in this one. And the way also, the moment where Mbenga was told afterwards, so what had happened here was Mbenga gave her a decision, okay, what do you want? She wants to stay. She's immediately taken away from the net, but also comes back. And that moment, I wish they kind of would extend it a little bit more, because I almost felt like it didn't ruin the moment. It just it felt too fast, too soon. But when she came back, she rematerialized. She was older, because apparently moments in time for Mbenga is like years already, and she's grown up. And the moment I was getting to was when Rakia said that she named the entity, the consciousness, Debbie, and Deborah. And Deborah, funny enough, I didn't actually mention it in the review, but Deborah was her mom, the name of her mom. And the way Mbenga kind of just broke down there and sort of cried, that it was really good. And I felt that, but also Deborah's name of my sister. So shout out to you, my sister. Overall, a very heartstringy episode. It really did pull on the heartstrings. We got a little more of Hammer. Loved it. Of course, everyone got their fun in. Uhura, she went all ham. She was the queen. Again, we saw this preview in the character trailers that we covered. And it was just really fun to up to that point, and then they all of a sudden, and that's kind of where I felt like I was such a high on just being happy, having fun. It was a slice of life episode, and all of a sudden, boom. But it was a moment that I thought was really powerful and strong, and that's why I feel like I sort of connected and resonated with it. So it was really, really strong episode, and that's going to probably show in the rank. Definitely will show in the rank. Next episode, oh, geez. All Those Who Wander, episode 9, and this, oof. So of course at this point, captains, we had already met Matt Capacci, and he already told us that this is the other episode that he worked on, and he was proud of the episode. And of course he's the assistant editor, not a writer, but having said that, this episode had a lot of things going on. And even before this, this is when we also talked to the actor, Bruce Horak. Shout out to you, sir, again, who's a fellow Calgarian. So we were able to actually do an interview with him here on the bridge. And I already loved Hammer before that. And of course, I loved him more after. But this is the episode where we get to see a lot of things happen here. And this is, of course, because it was wrapping up. This is episode 9 already. And essentially, it's an episode involving the gore in there. Of course, you see, and I have that crying face there. Because, yeah, you know what? At the very end here, sadly, unfortunately, Hammer does actually get vets, because we find out that the Gorn reproduce via inside bodies of hosts. And within the episode there, Hammer got sprayed, sort of saving Uhura, but then he becomes a host to these. And the solution, which I did not agree with on this one, because of course he died, he actually took his own life by jumping off ship there, which was another Constitution. They call it a Somber class, but it's the same. It's a Constitution class. Why couldn't they put that? Because at the end there, they could have said, why don't we put the transporter buffer until we figure it out? Mbenga said that. That never came to anyone's mind, but it sort of was looked over, glazed. But of course, it's at the end of the day, it's still just a make-believe story. But I really wish that they would have made a better effort in saving this character, because and I told this to Bruce himself, which every scene that he's been in, it's always been weighted. And a lot of things there, of course, we get more on here, and it was the little girl that was on the Somber class that was actually the sister of the Elder Servant. So those two are siblings, and I thought that was really cool. But of course, we get more on here. She gets some good. We get some actually Sam Kirk here as well. But this was a very emotional episode. I did cry. My face leaked, and Bruce did such a good job there at the end. And this is where, another sort of moment between Team Hamura, so Hammer and Uhura, them working together, had a lot of dynamics in this episode. But this also felt like a Predator type aliens thing going on. And I'm sure I was for it. I know the references there. Why not? At the end of the day, it was still pretty cool to sort of have that. And of course, as soon as you see it, you kind of take those references, and I enjoyed it. But this episode did a lot to me, because Hammer died because he got infected, so he jumped off the ship to kill himself. Now, there was a comment made. We didn't actually see him die. We just saw him fall. So maybe because it's cold. And of course, there's a line that he says there, and he says, just like Andoria, I have it there in the thumbnail. He says that because everyone was cold, and this is, of course, their sort of the Enar, this is their weather. And he says, just like Andoria. So an end to a character that was actually a fan favorite, and the next day on Twitter was going absolutely insane. But it was good character writing for someone that I thought they should have kept. And there was a solution, which I believe was the transporter buffer. But this, though, was really good. Again, more La'an in this one. Just trying to be the whole Gorn Hunter thing, and didn't have a lot of Una or Ortegas, because they were actually, this was a split mission. Some of them went down to the planet. The Enterprise actually went to resupply a station. And a very moment here, again, when one of my favorite moments, of course, is when Uhura said, you have to let us try to help you. Chapel hugged Uhura, and I felt that. I was just like, oof, I felt that. So good episode all around. And we get to the final one, episode 10, because Romulans, and of course, because Romulans, that was episode Equality of Mercy, the last episode. This was a play on the TOS, Balance of Terror. Now, the premise of this is, or the base of this is done in an alternate future, because they went to an outpost on the neutral zone, and in the neutral zone, the commander there had a son, and his name was Ma'at. Ma'at is actually one of the cadets that doesn't make it in Pike's future, in that accident where we see Pike, of course, become, we all know where he's headed. He is one that is who doesn't make it. But what happens here is a future Pike comes in, and this is like one of the fan service. I loved it. He was wearing a Wrath of Khan uniform, an updated Wrath of Khan uniform, but very, very faithful. And he was actually sent there by the Borath Klingons. He had a time crystal, and when he touched it, he was shown a future. This is either shown or teleported, or I'm not sure. Time stuff is shenanigans, but it's in the future and 6 months after the accident, and which brings them to when Balance of Terror would have happened if Kirk, and of course this is where we get introduced to Kirk. I'll touch on Kirk later, but this was obviously all Pike, and they did a lot of things here. And I did watch a video on YouTube that was comparing some of the scenes they took from the TOS, which was of course the inspiration from this. They did a lot of good things here, in my opinion. This is also a very strong episode, but it closed off the season. And this is what I loved about Strange Worlds. It was closing off a lot of things in terms of its storylines. It had a couple loose ends here and there. But this is what I was saying earlier, is I thought they would have actually Cybok in this episode, because we were introduced to him. Now, of course, he might be introduced in season 2. I don't know, but I thought, you know, other than a couple things here and there, they tied off all of the stories that were overarching, but also with the episodes were self-contained, which I loved. This episode did the same thing. It did it pretty good, and I'm sure there's a lot of fan service here. There's a lot of awesome moments in here, and of course Triz's face leaked here at the end, because with him and how he changed the future was he was actually writing a letter to Mott not to be at the place and time when the accident happens, and of course that does happen, but in doing so it changes the future. Of course, Pike is still on the Enterprise. Kirk is now the captain of another ship. And again, this is the same problem I'm having with Spock, is it's hard for me to connect with Kirk because it's just such big shoes to fill. Now, of course, you can toss it up to it's a different timeline, an alternate timeline, a projected future that never happens. However you want to look at it, it's up to you. Your canon, your head canon, however you want to go about it. That he could be a changed person because he's not the captain of the Enterprise, sure. But his stature, his sort of presence compared to Pike's was just no contest. Pike kind of overwhelmed, I believe, the screen time when they were together. But he did what he could. That's who they picked, and that's who they're running with. How they actually we have more of Kirk in season 2, we'll see. Because of course, there's going to be a point in time, like I said, that the original sort of crew for the Enterprise that we have now in Stranger Worlds is going to make that transition into, of course, the Legacy crew, and Kirk is going to be heading that. They had a lot of pew-pews too as well. We were introduced to the Romulan fleet. We saw the Tallis that we saw in Picard. I had an issue with that. Also, they only fired phasers here, which were phaser bolts, more or less, not sustained phaser beam fire. So again, could they modify their weapons? Sure. To fire that way, why not? We've seen it before. So, but again, it solidified that their phasers are reddish orange and not the blue screeching ones that we're used to. So I guess they go back to that in TOS, unless they're just retconning that altogether and just going with that. But had good moments, of course, with the sub-commander and the plot with Pike here, but it's because of Pike this whole thing changed, and in doing so, changing the future. In every subsequent change that he does try to change the future, unfortunately, the trade-off of him not getting, you know, hurt in the accident is, well, Spock. And that moment when they showed Spock, so that moment where he goes into the medbay, because they do escape the fleet, but of course what happens is the Romulans in that time actually declare war against the Federation for all this stuff. Of course, we went over it in the episodes, but it's just fun to talk about, to be honest with you, captains. But the moment where he reaches Spock, Nurse Chapel again just does, that's all her moment in this episode, and she does such a good job explaining that Spock's never going to be the same. Pike's reaction, it just, again, pulled on my heartstrings. It was Pike did so good in this episode. He was good with his future self, as himself. At the end of this whole thing, though, it was a very, very strong episode. It really was. And I feel that it was a very good homage to the Balance of Terror from the TOS, from the original series. But it's a glimpse only, because at the end, of course, he goes back, and the big reveal, though, which I thought was at the end, is, well, Una actually gets taken away because, by the way, by Kirk's girlfriend, because of her genetic altercation. Of course, the last thing that we see here says, it isn't over. So, you know, again, a very good episode. A lot of ship pew-pews. We saw a good portion of that Romulan sort of new fleet there in this alternate timeline, whatever you want to call it. But some good moments and a really good ending to a season, in my opinion. Now, after sitting around for 2 weeks trying to sort of rank this, and here, this is a new picture that was actually tweeted out there. I love this. I really do. It showed all the sort of episodes, and you look at this, I was brought back to, of course, each and every episode. Overall, just a great season. What happens when I start ranking these, again, just because I have something ranked at the very bottom, it does not mean by any means that it's a bad episode. It's just I have the issues with it. But really, you know, going around the table there, we'll start with who they're showing here. Like, T'Pring, of course, is more tied to Spock. I had my troubles connecting with Spock there, but really had moments where I could connect with him. But knowing that he's filling shoes in of Spock, Leonard Nimoy, it's hard. But Mbenga, his story there with his daughter, just absolute mwah. It was good. Again, heartstrings pulled. Nurse Chapel, a very good character who was a surprise character, in all honesty, and I love the fact that she was able to give me moments that I could appreciate, and it really showed the actress's capability to convey what the writers wanted, and I think she really did a good job of that, in my opinion. Of course, he had Emmer, Bruce Horak. We were able to talk with him. That still is one of my best, and I will say, my best moments in my Star Trek life up to this point. Great actor. Anytime he was on screen, just a weighted feel with everything that he said. I really wish that they didn't actually kill him off, and hopefully that we may see him as another character, but we'll see. La'an, my up and down relationships with her, but she is at the end a very surprise character that I didn't think I was connect with, but I did. And, you know, of course, Uhura, you have her being one of the legacy crew and coming to her own by the end of the season, and I'm really looking forward to see how she does in the next season. Ortegas, surprise character, loved her. Wish she had an episode to herself. She had moments, but never an episode where she was sort of showcased, and that kind of sucks. But of course, you had Una there. Loved her from Discovery. Loved her here. And of course, we're left on a cliffhanger. And I thought these things were supposed to be self-contained episodes, but they're not. We gotta wait till season 2. That sucks, but it's not over, as Pike says, and we're gonna definitely see more of her, and I cannot wait for that. And of course, he had Pike, who was the tone setter of all the episodes. Loved the way that he carried himself, and showing him between Kirk in that last episode, he just fit right in there, and made this his Enterprise, his crew. And of course, you had the Enterprise. Love how we got this ship back in Discovery. They didn't change it much. She did her thing. Loved how they respected her as a character. So, having said all that, after ranting on for an hour and how much I love Strange Worlds. How do I rank them? Well, this is how we rank them. Again, captains, this is just my opinion. When we rank these, this is not it's something low. It doesn't mean that it's a bad episode. But so at number 10, I'd have to put in episode 2. Just because of the La'anisms there, it was just overpowering. But again, still was a very good episode regardless. And Uhura's voice was just so beautiful. Like I said that already. Now, number 9, I'm going to put in the Serene Squall. And one of the reasons why is because the Cybok thing was left open-ended. But we still had those good moments of Captain Angel. Loved it with, of course, like I said, Spock and Chapel. Great episode, regardless, nonetheless. Now, for number 8, we're going to have here the Spock Amok. And that's because of just kind of sort of my connection with Spock, like I had mentioned, with all the episodes that we have done. Again, not necessarily low or bad, just the fact that it was just hard to sort of connect with him, but still good. But I was able to connect with Spock and T'Pring in this particular episode. So what's number 7? Well, I'd have to put in for the Ghosts of Illyria. Love doing, of course, Captain. You know that I do love her, and I've loved her from Discovery. She was really good, had a lot of things, but if I had to rank it, these next ones were really hard coming, especially after 7. Or this spot 7, I mean, being the Ghosts of Illyria, which is the 3rd and 7th rank. Or the 4th, I should say, or 7th rank, but the 3rd episode. Now, the next episode here is Memento Mori. I think because of how strong they did really good with the background, the Gorn, the feeling that they did here, they were making the Gorn scary. An enemy that I thought was a joke, they actually did good. So again, really good there, the way they did that, in my opinion. Now, number 5, I would have to put A Quality of Mercy, just because of how I've explained the issues I had with it. Because these next ones, oof, they're really good. Now we're gonna have to put here the next here, the episode 6, of course, Lift Us Where Suffering Cannot Reach, just because of the heartstrings that have pulled and sort of how they've made it a happy episode into that realization episode. It was good, in my opinion, and nothing could really make that any lower or higher. But it was really hard to rank these, to be honest with you. They were all really hard to rank, but if I had to rank them, that is where I am going to rank them. Now, the next one here, we'd have to say, would be the Elysian Kingdom. Just because, of course... Actually, you know what? We're going to change that. No, we're changing that. See, we're doing this real time. All Those Who Wander. I love Hammer. Good movie. Had its moments. We even took some sound commands from it. But I think when I think about the connection, especially if I'm talking about connection, I'd say the Elysian Kingdom would have to be the second one, because of how I could relate to the father-daughter relationship that Mamenga and Rukia was able to project through the screen. And it was just a fun episode, but this is, again, one of the episodes that made my face leak a lot. And of course, number 1 would be Strange New Worlds, the episode that it all started on, and it really set the tone for how good the season was. And I'd mentioned this with all the trailers that we covered. if all those were the good bits, the episodes would have all just been bonus. And you know what? They all have been. So that's how we rank the captains. I know it's another hour video of Strange New Worlds, but I will say that with Strange New Worlds, it has just made me feel closer to the franchise just due to the opportunities that we've had here on the bridge, which was, one, obviously talk to one of the actual actors that came from Strange New Worlds, which was Bruce Horak. Having done that interview, how can I not feel closer to Star Trek? And of course, meeting one of the assistant editors on Twitch who rated me and were able to also become good friends and actually talk Trek too, because we actually did an interview with him. Well, and it was just absolutely amazing to just have that also nerd out session with him on the bridge there with us. But it's hard to deny that Strange New Worlds from episode 1 to 10 was just great all around. And I really cannot wait for season 2. And I really hope that they just keep the same formula. And again, we're interested to see how they're going to actually do the transition from Pike's crew to Kirk's crew. But I do hope that they give Pike a lot more time. And it's going to suck that we're going to not be able to talk about this. But there may be some things that we're still going to do. No, there are some things that we're going to do that are still Strange New Worlds related here on the YouTube bridge. Captains, I know this has been a long video, but as you can tell, I do, and I love Strange New Worlds. And I hope that we can continue now. Again, I'm not sure if I'm going to continue on with the reviews. Captains, if you want me to, we can probably try to do shorter ones of them, but it's hard not to, because again, I love it and I just love sharing my passion for the Star Trek Stranger Worlds here on the YouTube bridge. So do me a favor, captains, like the video, comment below, how do you rank the season 1 episodes? Now overall, I would have to rank 9.5. It's not perfect, but that's why it just gets a 9.5. It's pretty darn close for the time it's being made, for what they did, and listen how they listened to the fan base and gave us this. 9.5. It's not without its faults. It's really strong in my opinion, and it really, for me personally, got me back to loving Star Trek. And really, at the end of the day, captains, you know, whenever I'm also watching these episodes, it was a great way to kind of escape from IRL and just be taken to Strange New Worlds via this series. And though for only a moment, it made me happy. Yes, my face would leak at times, but that was it's sad, but it's also a good thing, because it speaks to the writing for me. I understand, captains, if you don't like Strange New Worlds, that's fine. For me personally, I leaned into it. I'm glad I did. I'm glad I watched it. As much as I don't like watching weekly, I'd rather binge it, but it made me just, again, love Star Trek. So subscribe to the YouTube bridge, captains. Expect more stuff, a couple more things that will come out from our Strange New Worlds, because we have some things that have inspired us to do more things on Star Trek Online, which of course we will do in the next coming weeks. So look out for those, captains. But with that said, we're going to leave it on this note.
Don't let them promote you. Don't let them transfer you. Don't let them do anything that takes you off the bridge of that ship, because while you're there, you can make a difference.
Actually, we'll do it also with this.
Live long and prosper.